T Advertising Solutions was great because for all intents and purposes, that was a startup inside of T-Mobile that grew inorganically through acquisition. And so it's inherited the culture of entrepreneurs and that startup mentality. And I think that's something that is very unique when you combine that with the resources and the scale of a large company like T-Mobile.
This is the Snarketing Podcast for marketers by marketers, talking to marketers with just a touch of snark. Now, here are your hosts, Valerie Vespa and Matt Wurst.
Hello, friends, listeners, neighbors, loved ones, and other people who randomly stumbled across this podcast. Welcome to the Snarketing Podcast. I'm Matt Wurst.
And I'm Valerie Vespa.
And we are once again honored that you have decided to take some time out of your day or your night to listen to what I have a feeling will be a wonderful episode. We don't know yet because you never know until you get started, right, Val?
Well, I know who our guest is, and I do have to say I have a very strong affinity towards him because of how smart and lovely he is.
Would you say that his aura is magenta?
Exactly. It is magenta and bubbly and lovely. He actually reminds me of a Disney prince, I have to say.
He is such a positive light of energy. You're right. He's like the perfect person. He's smart. He is funny. He's charming. He's handsome. He's everything I'm not. And frankly, I'm a little intimidated by what's about to happen here.
But you are wearing magenta.
I am wearing a magenta. Yes. I didn't want to spoil that yet, but he will be surprised when he hops in. I always try and make our guest feel as comfortable as possible. And who knows, maybe he hasn't been around the color magenta lately. I don't know.
Well, either way, maybe we should kick it. Bring him on.
Okay, we will do that. We will let Al do the official intro, but we were just together in Cannes a few weeks ago. We had a wonderful dinner. I spent more time with him than I did with you, Valerie. We're going to have to correct that next year.
I know.
But in the meantime, let's bring him in because I can't get enough of this guy.
So today's guest deserves a more buttoned up and formal introduction to set the stage. Cherian Thomas is an entrepreneur and media innovator who built an incredibly successful video media platform that he sold to T-Mobile a few years ago. He's got his finger on the pulse of where retail media and consumer behaviors are coming together. And wait a minute, it looks like they're already starting.
What's up?
We're going to roll into this hot because the technical difficulties that we experienced should not be in any way representative of you as a tech entrepreneur or telecommunications executive. So I'm glad we were able to figure this out.
You know what? Getting into this link was harder than finding Val at Cannes.
You and me both.
You guys are...
We got to give Val like a Where's Waldo shirt next year so we can know exactly.
I'll share my location, all right? I'll share it for the whole week.
Oh, what is up? How
It's
are you
good
both?
to see you. You know, you are representing. So for our listener who cannot necessarily see us,
Listener, singular?
well, we like to talk to one person at a time, but you are representing in a T-Mobile fully branded shirt. I did the best thing I could, which is wear magenta.
I don't know. We got to check the Pantone referee on that one, Matt. That's not quite magenta there.
Exactly what I said to him.
Are you maybe?
That's like a dad grilling shirt. Are you wearing New Balance?
I am actually. I think I just stumbled into some bad lighting, which is the story of my life.
All good, man.
Well, thank you for joining us. We have never done a rolling start like this before, but I'm thinking that maybe it will help our ratings. So let's see.
Yeah.
But if anyone can bring the heat, can bring the thunder, can bring the noise, and bring the funk, it's our man Cherian. So thank you for joining us. It's nice to see you. Even though we were just together, at least you and I were together, and Valerie and I were together a few weeks back on the other side of the ocean.
We couldn't get the trifecta. I don't know if I could bring the noise, the funk, and the thunder, as you mentioned, but I did dust off this old microphone. So am I sounding like, is this thing legit or what?
I got to tell you, I'm impressed. You sound better than most guests we've had on here. So thank you. Thank you.
We don't mess around. I mean, you guys got your headsets, and Valerie looks like she's about to fly like a Cessna 172.
It's the only thing that's been working with my computer. I don't know, so I'm going with it. I think this is from like 1984. I don't even know what this headset is.
We're 20-something episodes in, and it took us 20-something episodes to figure out how we get our audio, our video, and our recording. We're not going to admit this. Actually, we will. We did an entire episode that we found out after we were recording wasn't actually recording. So, look, it's we're here to learn. We're here to learn from each other, but we're excited to learn from you. So, are you ready to jump in?
Let's rip it. I've been ready. We've been talking about this since Cannes 2023. It's now post Cannes 2024, so I've been ready for.
I got to be honest. The waiting list is was heavy.
Yeah, the queue is big.
We had to get through several people named Jason. There were several of those. But we've cleared the deck, and you are here. And so let's get started. Valerie, do you want to kick things off? Do you want me to kick things off? We have prepared for this episode about as much as we prepare for any other episode.
I mean, so Cherian and I go back. I just want to start off with how I met you. I was really intrigued by a product that you created before T-Mobile. And I sat in a conference room and learned about this product, and we'll get into it in a bit. But I wanted to, before we get into that, like, and we sat, and the weirdest part about this, Matt, I don't know if you know, I was in a glass conference room. Cherian's going through his pitch with me, and I was really intrigued by the SaaS product that he created around this product. But this man walked by, and it ended up being someone that I worked with when I was 22 years old, and he was staring at me through the glass pane, and I was like, who is this strange man staring at me? And it ended up being this person that I worked with at Morgan Stanley. It was the weirdest, and he was also Cherian's investor at the time, right?
He was. And it was odd because here I am having like this, what I thought at the time was a productive, meaningful meeting with Val. And the entire time she's looking out the glass doors at somebody else.
Look, if you learn nothing else from this, it's don't get glass windows in a conference room, because it's going to totally divert attention from whatever that focus is supposed to be.
Good point.
But
good point.
That was wild though, and like the fact that you guys had known each other, that was like a hug. You gave him a hug as if you hadn't seen him in 20 years. It was
because it was about that.
Valorie's a hugger. So that's what she does.
It was a different time. I was a very different human.
So was this was this with Spotluck or Octopus?
This was with Spotluck. Which was the a tech company I'd started before Octopus, which, you know, we got punched in the stomach and kicked in the gut and learned a lot from there. And so it was awesome. I wouldn't take anything back, but it was a consumer.
Explain what this is. So this was post grad, right?
Yeah, actually, ironically, this was actually my thesis in grad school when I was at Georgetown. Like, I basically said, hey, you know, I don't feel like prices in a restaurant on a Tuesday at 2 when it's raining should be the same as prices in a restaurant on a Friday night at 6 when there's like a 1 hour wait. And, you know, this was 2013. So like yield management was really popular with hotels.com and Priceline and Uber and airlines and so forth. But restaurants weren't doing it. There was no dynamic pricing in restaurants. And so we created some software that would, essentially fluctuate prices in restaurants through smart discounts based on day, time, weather, and other factors that impact restaurant occupancy. And so, you know, restaurants loved it because it was smart, right? I mean, our competitors were Groupon and Living Social, who were just taking 50% off and then getting a 50% revenue split. So it's a net 75% off. And we would come in there and say, hey, on a Wednesday, our software will calculate this is what the appropriate incentive should be. So it was really cool. Restaurants loved it. We'd signed nearly 2,000 plus restaurants. And if anyone has ever signed a restaurant, it is a local restaurant. It's kind of challenging. There's no like email. There's no office hours. It's like, hold this chicken, I'll sign the contract, right?
Literally written in blood. Chicken blood.
Yeah. And so it was a two-sided platform, right? One side, we had restaurants and merchants who loved it because it was smart. And on the other side, it was a gamified experience. So like, you know, Valerie, you, Matt, and I, if we're trying to figure out where to eat, we're going to argue. And be like, hey, Val, where do you want to go? I don't know, Matt, where do you want to go? Right. So like we wanted to solve the dining dilemma, and we use gamification, kind of like a roulette wheel. So instead of arguing about where to eat, you get one spin per day, and it would spin kind of a restaurant roulette wheel, pick a local spot, and give you a smart incentive. And so again, two different stakeholders, right? The consumers, you needed to solve this recurring problem, and the gamification was great for that kind of variable rewards, right? What am I going to get today? Which was great for app.
So you actually took an idea that I had 20 years ago and made it practical, except mine was a little bit different. My dynamic pricing for restaurants the idea was based around how hungry each individual guest was. Because my theory was it's like supply and demand. The hungrier you would have been, the more likely you're going to pay more. But I don't know how you gauge that, and therefore that idea fell flat. Not all good ideas come to life. Question for you with Spotluck is, as you were building and scaling this, right? You talk about small businesses, and we've all worked with big and small businesses. But what were some of the other early challenges you faced in dealing with those types of, I mean, did you get like paid on time? Was some of those issues that everyone dealt with, were they popping up in your ecosystem?
It's funny that you mentioned that, because I'll get a lot of folks on LinkedIn who have like ideas similar, or at least in this category, and they'll hit me up and be like, hey, I would love to pick your brain. And I'm always like, I'll give them like, hey, this is what happens around this corner. And here are like the top 3 things to look out for. So I guess a couple things, right? So just kind of breaking it down from the two-sided marketplace, right? One thing is, yes, you do have challenges with restaurants. Restaurants have relatively low margins. Not a lot of them succeed. And so you've got like this high turnover. But as you mentioned, restaurants would pay, the person who brings their food, the person who brings their kind of or supplies them with napkins, the toilet paper guy, and then only if there's money left, the person who like marketed and got someone into the door. So we were like last on the list. So that was one challenge. But then on the consumer side, I think it was really about finding like the super cohort, right? So when you have a consumer facing app and you've got hundreds of thousands of monthly active users, you kind of look back and you find like the super cohort, right? Or the 80-20, right? Where like 80% of your revenue is coming from 20% of this target persona. And it was really interesting. Like that was our biggest thing, is like, we needed to find the person who lived in a city, went out to eat 2 to 3 times a week, had a beer on a Tuesday, and, and like, what did that person look like? What was in their wallet or purse? And how do you try to target those users? And so that was a challenge, and we were able to solve that and really hit some excellent growth in there.
So what ended up happening to Spotluck?
Oh, yes. It's actually a great story. And you're aware of this, but as I mentioned, right, the challenge is, how do you find that super cohort? Well, it turns out, guys, believe it or not, but people who live in a city or 25 to 35, go out to eat 2 to 3 times a week are also
in cabs,
avid, Uber and Lyft users, right? And so that was the common denominator that we saw with these like, kind of personas that we would create, is like, all right, what's the common thing amongst this great group of super users? And all of them were rideshare kind of goers, right? And so what we ended up doing is, we were like, well, how do you market, right? 2013, 2014, how do you market to an Uber or Lyft rider? And there was no way of doing that at all. And so we ended up, I ended up grabbing like 2 interns, went into a small office and said, hey, let's get in the back seat with them. Why don't we develop a tablet, kind of like in-flight entertainment, but why don't we do that inside of Uber and Lyft vehicles? And we'll play trivia so folks can have an engaging experience. But in between the trivia, let's run Spotluck ads to get customer acquisition of the best super cohort for our app. And so to answer your question, what ended up happening is out of a pain point that we had, which was, how do you get to this customer? We created a solution, which was tablets in the backseat of Uber and Lyft vehicles. And it turned out that was getting us the best users. And it also ended up turning into what was Octopus, right? So started out by marketing our own company, but you all know this, being in the advertising world, no one wants to see the same Spotluck ad over and over and over again. And so we ended up signing, at first it was like some local scooter companies, then some restaurants, and we're like, okay, other people also want to reach the person in the back of an Uber and Lyft. Then we went to Madison Ave and signed like, a bunch of Fortune 500 brands who were like prepaying. They're like, this is amazing, right? And in short, we had two businesses. One dealt with local restaurants, had like a 16-month payback period. The other dealt with Fortune 500 brands who were prepaying, right, to use their budget before end of year. And so we ended up making, I wouldn't even call it a pivot. This is like, 180, right? Like, degree turn to basically focus on the better business model, which was Octopus.
So, okay. So this clearly has planted this entrepreneurial bug in your brain. Maybe you had it before grad school, maybe you didn't, I don't know. But now as you look back on those days before we kind of pivot to the bigger story here, are there lessons that you take away with you just for entrepreneurship overall as you've grown in your career?
Well, I think, part of the reason Octopus had such high growth, right? I mean, we started out with a few hundred, vehicles, and now, we're going to be at 100,000 plus vehicles by the end of the year. So that's not done without a team. And the team that functions is kind of like the CEO of their own positions. I just wore the hat, but my job was to kind of glue everyone's superpowers together. And what I'll say is that going from the core team who was focusing on spot lock and then instantly pivoting, we all had chemistry from day one, right? It wasn't like, hey, what are you great at? And what, and so we were able to really get out of the gates really quickly because there was that team chemistry instantly. And so one of the lessons learned there is one, that finding your superpowers and the superpowers of your respective team members and doing that earlier is critical and key. And when you go through a pivot, you kind of have that chemistry instantly. And so we were able to achieve some.
So quick follow-up. As someone who spent a lot of time in New York City taxi cabs in the early part of this century, taxi TV was a thing that very early on was very innovative here in New York. And then after like 8 rides or maybe 2 or 3 months in, you're seeing the same ads, to your point. If I was the driver of one of those cars, I would have probably murdered people at that point. Were there any terrible or funny or interesting stories about how drivers engaged in this experience with you? Like,
can I just say, because I sold taxi TV, or at least attempted to, and it was impossible in those early days. Like whoever was the network that was running the content on there was also in tandem trying to sell that space, and it was just they were doing a horrible job as well. So there were no ads, so it was just the same content running all the
Jeopardy
time.
trivia questions.
And can I and now I'm oh my gosh, like Pad Sajak or whatever, Wheel of Fortune. But like, can I say, just being a user, when I see an Octopus screen, or now T-Mobile, sorry, first of all, I think of Cherian, and then I take a picture of it and I text him.
But
sure,
he outside loves
of that, I love the trivia. Like, that is the game changer for these screens for me. Anyway, I'm sorry. I'm just doing a little sales pitch here.
Well, I want to answer your question, Matt. You brought up a valid point, right? Like with Taxi TV, there was a lot of kind of like lessons learned on what not to do. And so we learned a lot from that. And one of the things was, hey, you can't just have the same Jimmy Kimmel thing on repeat, right? The customer experience is key, and the customers need to love this. And even more so when it's a rideshare vehicle, because that's in the driver's personal vehicle, right? And so, it's not just, we just slap something on there. They are choosing to equip their vehicles with this. And so customers are the number one stakeholder. I love, Val, when you send me those photos. In fact, the most recent one you said, I think the screen was teaching you French.
Yes, right? I love
right?
that.
So like, what an awesome experience. Like, you just got back from France. I don't know if you speak French, but like, that's something that you would engage with, because you're like, hey, all right, how do I say hello, or where's the bathroom, or whatever it may be. And so one of the lessons we learned is that a lean in experience is what's going to get engagement. And so how do we get folks to interact with the screen? Turns out riders love games, and games that spit out prizes are even better. And so that was our content, so to speak. And so we would do a lot of branded games, and then we would have, non-invasive ads in between those games. But at the same time, I think it's important to note, if the rider is not happy, then the driver is not happy. And if you have unhappy riders and unhappy drivers, don't even think about connecting brands, right? Because brands don't want to be in a place that's not a great setting. So that was our North Star, is like, A, how do you make sure riders absolutely love this? B, if, happy riders yield happy drivers. And once those two stakeholders are satisfied, then only do you connect the brands for monetization. And yeah, as you mentioned, Octopus, in 2022 was acquired by T-Mobile, and that really put the
Can I say
boosters
Mazel
on,
Tov?
right?
Is that appropriate for this?
Yeah.
I don't know what you say at an
Yeah,
acquisition,
absolutely.
but that's it.
How many years has it been? How many years?
Oh, you know what? It was 2022, so we're 2024 now, so a little over 2 years, 2.5 years.
You're really struggling with the math there, Val? Was that a real question?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did you say 2022?
It seemed like a trick question for a second, but
sorry.
But to that point, right? T-Mobile cares insanely about its customers. There wasn't going to be a chance that a non-customer centric company was going to be part of this, Magenta mothership. And so that was always something that was really important for us. And then how do you connect with consumers on the move? How do you put, smiles and delight folks? But most of all, right, the business model makes a ton of sense, because a screen that's not in your house and not on your phone is going to need connectivity, right? And so all of those screens were on the T-Mobile network, which allowed for a rich experience and an interactive experience, given the low latency and network strength of T-Mobile. And yeah, we've grown tremendously ever since, and it's been fantastic. We also had some recent announcements with
Uber. Yeah,
with Uber.
I just saw that. Great.
So I think you were at Cannes, so we announced that, which is, we bring what we bring to the table, which is the scale with this massive network plus the connectivity. And Uber and Journey TV has an awesome and privileged information on the customer, and where is that customer going, and what is that customer's interests. And so they could really create this kind of CTV experience in a captive setting with sight, sound, and motion. And so that's something that we recently announced, and I'm very excited about, because I know I joke about this a lot, but it was a 1 + 1 = 8 type of scenario, where we, again, play to each other's strengths and really.
Your bad math is going to confuse Val, so maybe just try and keep it a little simple.
Hello, B2B marketers. Let me introduce you to a game changer in the lead generation arena, Leadfeeder. We all know the struggle of identifying those elusive website visitors and turning them into valuable leads. But what if I told you there's a tool that not only promises, but delivers on supercharging your lead generation and sales efforts? That's Leadfeeder. Imagine having the power to identify companies visiting your website, track their behavior in real time, and seamlessly integrate it all with your CRM. What sets Leadfeeder apart is the ability to provide detailed insights into visitor behavior, helping your sales team prioritize efforts and close deals faster. With customizable notifications, lead scoring, and GDPR compliance, Leadfeeder is changing the game. To revolutionize your approach to leads and deals, visit leadfeeder.com for a free demo. leadfeeder.com. And now, back to the conversation.
As you're obviously a very effective communicator for the technology, for the platform, for the benefits. But it must be interesting now as you move into kind of this big company mindset. Is T-Mobile the first big company, I'm making air quotes, that you've worked for?
It is, yeah, because I've always played kind of that CEO or CMO or building businesses and running my own. So yes, absolutely. It's a massive, massive company. But what's amazing about it is it operates very much with that startup mentality. And I think that's why we've had the success that we've had to date. We were the underdog, and we were always kind of, making moves and tactics and fighting as the little guy. And now, we're leading from the top. And so, a lot of people ask, what was this big challenge going from startup to T-Mobile? And quite frankly, the cultural aspect, are already in these Magenta walls of that startup grit, that grind, and building lean, mean teams within the large organization, placing small bets, but massive bets that have great yields. And so joining T Advertising Solutions was great, because for all intents and purposes, that was a startup inside of T-Mobile that grew inorganically through acquisition. And so it's inherited the culture of entrepreneurs and that startup mentality. And I think that's something that is very unique when you combine that with the resources and the scale of a large company like T-Mobile.
I know it made me so happy when the acquisition 2.5 years ago occurred, because I was worried that you were going to be like, oh no, I have to leave, but it's so great to see how happy you are and how much you're thriving there. But, can you just speak to sort of how your role has now evolved and being there for 2.5 years? Have there been major changes as far as that or
Yeah, I think one thing I'll say is that my role has definitely evolved. Right now, I oversee all of our digital out of home offerings. In addition to, there's the rideshare side, but then there's also the retail media side, and then there's also the fact that T-Mobile has, privileged first party data that we're able to bring into market and let brands and agencies have a better way of targeting, customers. And so my role I love in the sense that I actually believe that if you have the owner's economics and you have the core competencies of a telco, that can be applied in digital out of home. Because again, screens need connectivity. I mean, Val, you know this. I mean, you guys have all these billboards there. In fact, I do believe we put some 5G nodes on some of those boards with you.
Yeah.
And so there's a connectivity play. And that's something that, put us into the Coliseum with anyone when it comes to connectivity, and we will win. And so that's a strength that we bring to this industry of digital out of home, which quite frankly has been last to innovate and is innovating now, right? So it's ripe for, an 800-pound magenta gorilla to come in and say, hey, what can we do to make this better for not only ourselves, because we're a massive spender and we see massive pain points. And so how can we solve it for ourselves? And if we do it well for ourselves, then it can be scaled to
you've never dropped any nodes with me, even though you have with Val. But you and I connected, I don't know. No drop. But we connected, a year plus ago, and I am in the retail media space, as are you, but it's slightly different, right? T-Mobile's different business model when you compare it to a Walmart or a Target or a Home Depot in the way that they're thinking about it. What does the term retail media mean to you? How do you define it? How is it different inside the magenta walls? And by the way, literally your wall behind you is magenta. So you practice what you preach here. But so retail media is like a loaded term that means different things to different people. I've heard commerce media, retail media, travel media. You're kind of at the intersection of all of those, right?
Yeah. Well, I think it's a great question on just going back to like the definitions of that. And I do think there's a little bit of a line in the sand. So first, let's just say retail media is having its moment, right? And, when we see what Amazon has been able to do and what Walmart's been able to do and Target, et cetera. But a lot of these folks, in my opinion, are kind of looking left, right? They're focusing on online RMNs, right? Meaning Valerie goes to Walmart.com and she sees something different than Matt, right? Because Walmart has first party data on Val. They know she likes, basketball and tennis, and, Spalding and Wilson are willing to pay to get in front of Valerie when she gets there. So that's online RMN, but that's not leveraging connectivity, right? And so while everyone's looking left, I feel with T-Mobile, we have an opportunity to look right and really be the leader in in-store retail media networks. And what I mean by that is screens inside the store at the last 3 feet that allow brands to connect with consumers at the point of sale. And this is a super interesting space for us because if you look at the numbers, right, like more people are going into Walmart than going to Walmart.com. More people are going into Home Depot than going to HomeDepot.com. CVS, Walgreens, Lowe's, you name it, right? So therein lies an opportunity to make the digital out of home pie or TAM larger, right? Adding net new incremental screens. And now is the time because if you follow cost of screens, right? The cost of screens has come down tremendously over the past 10 years. I'm sure, Matt, you remember this. Val, you're too young. But like going to Circuit City and trying to buy a 75-inch television back in the day was like $7,500, right? And now, right, like because the cost of screens has come down tremendously, it yields an opportunity to create more touch points right throughout the customer journey. And so one of the things that we've done by drinking our own magenta champagne is we've developed some technology that allows us to power all of the screens in our own stores first, right? So T-Mobile Magenta stores, T-Mobile Metro stores, 11,000 locations, right? Like we have a massive footprint. And now brought that to market. It's the largest in-store retail media network connected to SKU level POS data. And we believe that that's going to be great for us. And then we can leverage that for third parties as well. So full circle, Matt, online RMN, very different than in-store RMN. In-store RMN, we believe you want to own the rails and not steal someone's Wi-Fi. You should be able to connect instantly. And that's where T-Mobile can come in and really play to our core competency there.
Amazing. I know we're doing something similar. We've been working with retail media networks to do audience extensions, like you said, using our boards, because I think it's working. We've been doing a test with Rundell, and it's been really effective. So do you see this becoming a larger piece of the share of your like monetization for T-Mobile advertising solutions? Do you feel like that's going to be the game changer for you, or what are you seeing? How are you seeing the media landscape evolving?
I do, but I think the first thing is can this enhance the customer experience inside of our stores, right? Like how do we add more lines,
Right.
sell more devices? And I'll tell you what, the screen, like the one behind me, does a much better job than planograms and suction cups with posters on it, right? And so first is like, how do we create an awesome experience for our customers, communicate our house content, our house messaging to our customers when it matters most?
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, we have a great endemic partners, right, who also want to connect with our customers at the last 3 feet. And so, yes, we do see this having a great impact, not only for customer experience, but at the same time, the ability to, generate monetization, but in a non-invasive way, right? So, and again, one of the things I'm most excited about is I love our kind of ethos of like, we are a big spender. We have pain points. Let's solve it for ourselves first. And then we can extrapolate that out into the marketplace. And, I think that's kind of the seventh inning that we're in right now.
Oh, seventh inning. Well, that feels later than most of the time. People are still talking about being in the first or second inning with respect to this. But in all honesty, retail media has been around 15 years. You go back and think about where and how this originated. Yes, mobile apps are connecting things. We are building extensions both to keep people on platform, drive people off platform. But think about this as a more communal experience. I know that's certainly where I'm thinking with my background. Do you think I guess this is a follow-up to Val's question, but is there a cap to this that you see? Like at some point, is an inventory a challenge?
I do believe, look, if you think about it this way, right? I believe in 2026, 2027, when you go to these retailers, there will be screens, right? And how do we create kind of the operating system per se to make life easy? Because not every retailer is an Amazon or a Walmart, right? They don't have ad tech backgrounds and so forth. And so how do you make it easy and an easy button for them? So that's one first stop. The second stop, as you mentioned, is that they're going to want to use that space to communicate their own messaging for their own brands, right? Or maybe it's even their white labeled brands, right, where they have high margins and so forth. So, like, how do you communicate those at the point of purchase? But then it's actually going to end up expanding beyond the store. And I'll give you a great example, which is with our in-store retail media network, we also couple that with near-store retail media network. So as Val mentioned, right, like one of the things we'll do is say, all right, you can be on the screens in our store, but then we will also activate our DSP seats and we will activate all of the digital out-of-home screens within a 1 to 5 mile radius of our stores, right? And so now you've got, your brand front and center at the last mile and the last 3 feet. And we solved the biggest hole in the digital out-of-home boat, which is, did the register ring, right? And so because we were able to know that, that's where you start getting stats like ROAS, right? Or did same store sales velocity increase, right? And these are the terms that marketers want. And to your point, Matt, once you're proving that, and we prove like, hey, this is what T-Mobile brings to the table at T Advertising Solutions, and here's this first party data that we have privileged access to. How do we then extend that to the mobile device as well? And so now then you have this omni-channel kind of approach, because 120 million people walking around with this, phone in their pocket. We are part of the customer journey no matter what, right? Because we have that T-Mobile device in your pocket. But then it's like, how do you create impactful, memorable touch points throughout that journey, at the last mile, at the last 3 feet, and then prove, efficacy with registers ringing.
So like going a little bit broader, you talk about ROAS or ROI or whatever it might be. What do you think are some of like the most significant challenges that marketers are facing today? I mean, I think about brands that have these huge JBPs and like spending all their media budgets towards these plans. I just what do you think are some of the larger challenges, and are there any solutions to ways to overcome it, you think?
And you don't just have to use acronyms, by the way. You can expand beyond acronyms. ROAS, ROI, JBPs.
I was going to see your acronyms and raise you some acronyms. So, but no, kidding aside, I mean, I think one of the biggest challenges, and we heard a lot about this at Cannes, if you went to any panel, right, you've got, changes to third-party cookies that are happening. You've got, Apple that released ATT and iOS 14.5 that has a huge impact on tracking location and sharing information with third-party apps. And so marketers are finding that they need to spend more dollars to reach the same customer, right? So their CAC costs are going up because the targeting mechanisms have gone down. And that's where we see a right to play with T Advertising Solutions, because we have that privileged first-party data. It allows us to give brands and agencies a better opportunity, a new tool in the toolbox to reach customers, where the tools in the toolbox right now are getting dull, right? Or they're lost, right? And so I think that's one big challenge that marketers are facing, and they're looking for solutions, and we want to be there to say, hey, here's what we can provide. I think, the second thing, and I think you touched on it as well, is there's a lot of emphasis on just like, performance. And I think people forget that there's also, you need folks to love your brand. Mm-hmm. And that's going to be done by making sure you have top of funnel awareness, and also, then the bottom funnel awareness. And T-Mobile is, practice what you preach. Like, walk around New York, try to not miss a T-Mobile advertisement. All right, like we understand the value of that top of funnel and connecting with customers, so that way when they do come into a store, right, it's not like the hi, nice to meet you, right? It's like you've had, delightful experiences with us, whether it's on TV, CTV, digital out of home, and mobile. So, second thing, Matt, would just be kind of, you can't forget about the top side of the funnel. That's extremely important. Well, sorry, just to go back on another challenge too, would just be, how do you reach that kind of younger generation, right? And Matt, I've heard you talk about this a lot with like vertical videos, and digestible snippets. Like, that's really important. And the consumer of 1984 is very different than the consumer of 2002. And so the same tactics aren't going to work. And so I think, just to add to the stack of challenges for marketers, that's one thing.
So as someone who has been at the forefront of innovation for a long time and seeing big ideas and then really figuring out how to make them a thing, what are some areas that Val and I, as less innovative, sheep-like objects in this industry, what should we be paying attention to? Where should we be following?
Wow. I've been fascinated with, again, I look at kind of things that require connectivity, and, because I think then we can actually come to the table with a right to win. And, drones in advertising, I think, have a lot of potential, right? Not only have the cost of drones come down, but at the same time, they require connectivity. And if you remember, kind of at Cannes, I think it was Cargo that put this on, but like, what a drone show, right? Like, that.
By the way, you know who produced that, right? That was Elon Musk's brother.
Yes, I did hear exactly, right? So, we want to talk about what's happening in advertising.
See, it's funny, when you were talking about, when you mentioned drones, I thought you were talking about Valerie again, just droning on, but different type of drone.
Hilarious.
Well, it's funny. I mean, it again requires connectivity. I think that there's awesome opportunities for you to be able to, create a message in the air, a delightful one that captures your attention, right? And utilize technology. So, I mean, it used to be get in a, single engine plane, strap a massive banner to the back, and then go back and forth, back and forth, right? Now you can launch, a few hundred drones in the air and communicate a better message, right? With motion and animations and so forth. So I think that that's something to pay attention to, just because, again, if you look at XY axes, you got like drone costs coming down, this, usage of connectivity that's becoming lower latency and much better and more effective. So I think that's one thing. The other thing too, as it relates to kind of in store, there's some cool things with holograms that I think are very eye catching in the retail space. And right now, some of the CapEx on that's a little bit expensive for scale, but at economies of scale, those become, a little bit more realistic. I definitely think retailers will use that in store because it's a delightful thing.
How ahead of its time was that Tupac hologram?
I was just going to say that.
Stage?
Like, is Tupac the next
Right?
big advertising celebrity for brands? Is he the next partner for T-Mobile?
He's coming back.
Well, I think it's funny, right? Like there's these holograms in a box where you have like a spinning LED light, right?
Oh,
and it's
obsessed.
able to create some amazing motion. You've seen them, right? It's fascinating.
It really is.
And so you have to kind of look at it and go, all right, well, at scale, these things become a lot more affordable. And where could that be applied? And a retail location makes a ton of sense.
For sure.
Right? And I've seen it before. You've got like a 3D Adidas shoe that's like rotating around.
Obsessed.
Right? And so, all right, let me go check this out. Yeah. So those are my 1-2 drones. And then, as time goes on and you achieve economies of scale, these in-store.
Do you think wearables?
That should be your profile photo, by the way. I think that was fantastic. Yeah. I think the wearables are definitely an opportunity. But I also think that there's opportunity for, kind of more targeted audio ads. Like look at the people forget to think about, like, look at Apple's AirPod sales. Like, it's unbelievable, right? How many people are walking around with this?
It really is.
So how do you make a 2.0 AirPod that provides value to customers, but at the same time can be, monetized through, great advertising as well. So
podcast advertising, by the way, is up 40% year over year. So, hey, we're open to business. We're open for business as well. So that's audio. Is that what you're talking about? Are you plugging for us here?
I agree. I mean, I definitely agree with that, but I'm also thinking about things like, with AI and data centers, there's a high cost for these things. They're being subsidized right now, but like, is there, a new aged AirPod device that has all of your AI capabilities right there in your ear? But if that's going to be challenging to afford, then can it be subsidized through targeted?
Or are there steps
right?
that you take to get there? Is it location based, right? Like an ad that's triggered audio wise as you're walking somewhere through an airport, etc.
Totally. Yeah, I think that's another thing that we're seeing. Again, as you have these kind of in-store retail media screens, right? Like you can activate BLE4 and now those screens become a broadcast and then phones become a receiver and you can communicate messages between the phone and the screen to make for a more, memorable experience. And so same thing, right? Like these AirPods have technologies in them where you've got Bluetooth, we know that, and so how can it know where you are or communicate with a brand that's nearby or provide an offer? So I mean, you mentioned Elon Musk and his brother, so we're shooting for the stars here, but these are just some ideas.
No, I dig it.
I haven't seen anything in market.
Well, so let's end on a more grounded note, if you will, because we've really covered the full 5G spectrum of ideas here today. So thank you, Cherian, for that. But we're going to pivot to the lightning round. First question, drum roll, we'll add in later with After Effects. First question is, how many articles of clothing do you currently own that have a dominant shade of magenta, over or under 25?
Definitely over.
Over. Wow.
The funny thing,
This doesn't have to be related to
the funny thing on that
Okay.
is like my kids are just like T-Mobile branding machines, right? Like we recently got a hamster. Kid you not, my hamster's name. So I have a son, Devsey's 8, and then my daughter is 6, and they got a hamster, and the name of the hamster is 5G. So like this house is branded. Oh, so it goes beyond the clothes and into the namings of animals. So
You better hope that 6G doesn't come along too far, too soon, or you're going to have to get a replacement hamster. So, unrelated to the last question, tell me one item that you cannot live without.
Ooh, probably my phone.
Me too. I would say the same
Yeah,
thing.
I know that's kind of cheating. I would say phone or tennis racket. Like I think being able to play some sports would be kind of challenging without.
Tennis racket is interesting. Although I just saw a YouTube video of people playing baseball with tennis rackets, and it was fascinating. On the flip side, I have a spot on my commute. It's between two stations where there is no cell phone service, and for those 5 minutes, it's the longest 5 minutes of my day. You would think that I was being tortured with some medieval just device.
It's called your own thoughts.
Well, that may be the darkness of the tunnel that I'm in.
My number one thing I look forward to every day is coming home, and I round up all the kids in the neighborhood, and I'll play like all-time quarterback while they're playing football, or I'll play pitcher for baseball, or and we literally, one of the things we started doing is playing baseball with tennis rackets. These kids can like knock it out of the park. So it might be the next new thing, Matt. You don't know.
We'll go from pickleball to, I don't know what it's called. We have to come up with a name. Do we know any good marketers? We need some good marketers for that. So I have octopus trivia for you.
Oh.
Do you know how many hearts an octopus has?
3 hearts. Come on now.
Wow, I did not know that until my crack research team of Google told me that. That's impressive. Where is your favorite place to travel? Since I've only ever seen you outside this country. True story.
Yeah. I really love Spain. My wife lived there for a little bit, and so that's been like a special place that we've gone to quite a bit. So I would say Spain, and then throughout Spain, like Mallorca, and then Madrid, Toledo, Barcelona. So like kind of just traveling between inside of Spain.
Best part of not having to be a CEO?
I definitely miss it. But the best part of not being it might be, the CEOs put a lot of, kind of pressure on there. You have investor stakeholders, right? You're obviously, in my case, like I was more frontward facing. So helping out with sales, helping out with marketing. And so there's a lot of pressure on your shoulders. And so I guess I enjoy the pressure. Like I want the ball when there's like a second left, right? But that said, it is definitely, less stressful to not have to fundraise.
Yeah.
So my last question, I don't know if Valerie has any others, but as a longtime enthusiast of technology and gadgets, my first real affinity and connection to T-Mobile was the Sidekick. Do you guys still have any Sidekicks lying around in a warehouse or closet somewhere that you can send me?
I don't know if I can answer that question, but I will say the marketing behind that was awesome, right?
I know.
I mean, they put it in the hands, speaking of, influence. It was really the first influencer strategy. They put it in the hands of NBA players.
Yep.
That was it.
Is that it?
Kevin Durant Sue Bird were walking around with these things in 2003.
What I will tell you, and these episodes are awesome, but our CEO actually does a video interview called Sidekicks at our Sidekicks, which is the name of like the T-Mobile bar and common area at HQ. And we'll get a whole bunch of amazing celebrities out there, and he'll just, kind of just have a casual conversation with them. And so that's at Sidekicks. That I can promise you. I will send you the next Sidekicks link.
Amazing.
Perfect. Well, as Valerie's sidekick on this episode, I will be the first to say thank you, Cherian, for joining us.
Thank you, Cherian. I love you. It's always great to see your face.
Thank you both. This is super fun. I'm glad that we got a chance to do this.
Me too.
Yeah, and I just I love that I could just totally drape myself in magenta for the day, and
You
now
look good in pink.
go back to.
You look.
Thank you. It's not pink; it's magenta.
That's right. That's right. It is pink, but anyway.
And that's a wrap on this episode with T-Mobile's Cherian Thomas. Thanks for listening. Thank you to our sponsor, Lead Feeder, and don't forget to check out all of our previous episodes of the Snarketing Podcast.